Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. On the show today, I have Josh from Lightspeed Hosting. Welcome and thanks for your time today. Please go ahead and introduce your company and what you guys do.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. My name's Josh Holmes, and our company is Lightspeed Hosting. So we bring infrastructure to areas, most of them pretty rural, and service customers that people don't want to service. All the same technology you're used to in the big city, but just accessible in the rural areas.
Awesome. So how do you get it to them? What do you guys do to make it available there?
Well, I'll tell you, there's not a lot of infrastructure in these cities, but there's hospitals, universities, manufacturing plants. They have companies, and these communities would love to grow, but they just don't have local technology providers, and they don't want to drive 2, 3, 4 miles away to a local data center or non-local data center. So a lot of companies choose to relocate elsewhere. And so some of these growing markets, the one thing holding them back from getting more businesses that want to be in the rural area is lack of technology. And the county I'm in is a perfect example. About 10, 11 years ago, we were in the same position here. It's one of the reasons why we built here for our first data center. But we also had no fiber. So the county wanted building a county-wide fiber network. We built the county's first data center. And from a business development perspective, now the county can actually attract these big businesses that without technology, they just can't operate. You can't operate a 3-shift, 24/7 manufacturing operation if you don't have actual internet, if you don't have places for data backup. So some of these rural communities, they're really being held back by lack of technology. And so that's really where we're trying to service. And by going into these markets where nothing exists, these markets, they welcome you with open arms. They love that anyone finally wants to be in their territory. And you get a lot of buy-in from local government and local businesses. So we like it. And I'll tell you, most of those businesses are they're smaller businesses, so we're not going after businesses doing $5 billion a year. I'd much rather do business with people who, there's ownership, there's a stake, right? The person you're talking to, maybe it's a generational business, maybe they inherited the business, but you're talking to someone who has a genuine connection with the success of that business.
Absolutely. So, like, how did you find this gap that exists?
An accident, honestly. I was working in the 90s and the 2000s mainly for large e-commerce companies, and I was a software developer because it was fun. If you wanted to be a software developer in the 90s, there was nothing more fun than e-commerce, right? I didn't want to go work in a factory and write code for test machines. I actually did that. That was one of my jobs back in the day. It's not a lot of fun in about 2010 or so. So we're getting to the point where like the dot-com boom had already busted, technology is on its way back up, and the e-commerce industry was really diversifying. Amazon was taking off, and I finally quit my job at one of the e-commerce companies I had been working for, and I started my own firm. And what I found out really quickly is on the bottom, you have a lot of two-people firms, Bob and Larry, and they've been doing this for 20 years, and they've got a handful of clients. And then at the top, you have Accenture, 500 dollars an hour. They've got tens of thousands of developers they can deploy on a project. But the truth is they're too expensive. And there's almost nobody in the middle. Nobody. And it's not because there's not business. There's business in those middle markets. It's that it's hard to get to be a middle market size company if you are doing what we do. The struggle to get past certain revenue points and then hire staff and find ways to keep growing, that's extremely hard, but it's even more hard to do if you're in rural areas. And so what we found is that there's a lot of people who don't even try. Like the business is there, but they don't even try. And so what wound up happening about four years in, I talked to my business partner. I said, I think we ought to consider building our first data center because all these customers, we're managing their infrastructure on Amazon, local data centers, downtown data centers, everywhere. We're managing them everywhere. And unlike software work, data centers get paid every month because no one wants their stuff turned off. And so the county that we're headquartered in had just announced they were building a fiber optic network, which had been a hot topic for a long time because we had almost no fiber in the county, but we were so close to Cleveland and Akron and Columbus and natural resources. Businesses wanted to be here, but you can't operate a business if you can't get decent internet. And so it became a barrier for our county to grow. So what we kind of looked at our county and said the same problem that exists in software development is bound to exist in data center services. If you look at a map of data centers, most of them are building next to these big metropolitan areas. And Northeast Ohio is a great example. You've got data centers in Akron and Cleveland and Columbus, but there's nothing in between. There's zero tying those big cities together anywhere. And so if you're fortunate enough to find a community like our county where you have good fiber access, you still have no local data center. And if something goes wrong, you're driving on a good day, you're driving 40 minutes into town to access that infrastructure. And that's if there's no storms, there's no traffic, there's no concerts. So it's a real pain to have your data that far away. And so we kind of looked at ourselves and said, I bet you the same middle market exists here. There's got to be the same market of people that they can't afford the big data centers, and they're far away, but they also really don't want it in their closet, that bottom level. And there's a lot of people who are like, well, I guess we're putting it in our closet because there's no data center, and it want it being true. And the more small markets that we look to expand into, we find the same exact problem. And they would love to have most of their production environment sitting in a data center in their community that is much higher step up from the quality of what their little data closet can offer them. They could put their servers 3, 4, 5 hours away at some big data center, but they don't want to, and they won't. They won't. And so we offer something that they just can't get otherwise, and it's worked pretty well.
So do you offer the fiber as well as the data centers, right? So all the connecting to the big cities and then eventually connecting them to the data centers is you provide that whole infrastructure?
That's most of the time, yeah. So here, a great example here in Ohio, we chose our location we're at now because it's a big hub for fiber that runs through to the big cities through our community. And so our data center here, I'm connected to Cleveland, I'm connected to Columbus, I'm connected to Akron. And so I have a large diversity of fiber that I can put clients on. I also have a large diversity of local networks to get people to my data center. And so from that standpoint, you're not talking about even going over the general internet. So if we virtualize your office, this is actually our biggest offering is virtual servers. If we virtualize your office, every millisecond counts. When your mouse is moving and you're typing or you're doing tasks like AutoCAD, the closer you are to where that compute happens, the better the experience is. So by being close to where these offices live, give us a huge advantage over top if they had to go 3, 4 hours away to where that data lives. So like here in the community, this is a great, for instance, I can get to downtown Cleveland in 2 milliseconds from our network. And so if you're anywhere within 50, 60 miles of our data center, using our systems, it would feel like it's literally on premise. It would feel like it's in your office, that the latency is that low. But if you had to use a data center in Chicago, or you had to use a data center in Atlanta or Austin, Texas, you're looking at 30, sometimes 40 milliseconds of latency. And now that same environment feels slow and sluggish. No matter how much computer power you have at the end, it's that connection in between that becomes a problem. So we think the future of data centers is by building close to the users where they're going to be at for the next 10 to 15 years, and not going after the big cities. They already have infrastructure. They don't need us. But all these communities where all these small businesses are building, they have nothing. And that's why we want to target those. But there's a lot of advantages.
So like to connect to the bigger networks, are you partnering with any bigger companies or you just do it on your own?
It's a mixture. So for instance, down in Columbus, we have Ohio IX. They're a large internet peering exchange. 2 miles down the road from us is Akron. Well, it's a suburb of Akron. Akron's really more like 30 minutes away, but there's IX about 2 miles away, ran by a suburb. And so they have their own city-owned internet, and they started their own internet exchange. So we connect to that as well. Here in Ohio, in the northern side, you have Cleveland, and Cleveland also has an exchange as well. So we're able to tap into all those different exchanges here in Ohio, and we have more bandwidth than you can imagine sitting here in the middle of nowhere. Like our building's literally in what used to be a cornfield. But there's a lot of bandwidth. There's a ton of it. And there's networks that all go through here. So you've got Everstream, we've got our county network, Spectrum, Crown Castle, all kinds of networks run in front of our building and come in here. And so if you're in Northeast Ohio, we can reach you with fiber somehow.
Great. Awesome. That's very cool. What were your challenges initially when you tried for the go-to-market strategy? What was your challenges there?
Yeah, I will tell you there's two big challenges. The biggest is money. So banks love to hear that you're going to be building a business in a big city. They think big city, big numbers, big loans, more customers. They do not want you to build in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I thought this would be easy. I know this field really well. I've spent my life in technology. The bank that we had been using up to that point, 5 or 6 years, did not want to help at all. And so we were really in a position where we use a lot of our own cash. So about 75% of our build out we did with our own company cash from our software development firm. And now, as we've grown, that's changed. We wound up switching banks. We found a bank that likes to deal with businesses of our size. And as they've got to know us and see our track record over a decade, now we can do things we couldn't have done back then. But our very first barrier was financing this. And I will tell you, the building I'm in right now, we don't own, although I'd love to own it. We're talking with the ownership, the two people who own it now, to see if we can buy it. But when we built, partly what got us over the hump in terms of financing is that they actually paid for a lot of the leasehold improvements to get generators and electrical transformers and all the really big, heavy equipment we need in a data center. They footed that cost and then worked it into our initial 5-year lease for us because the bank wouldn't. And so we really found, and again, we're in a community. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of people here who saw what we were doing and said, we really love what you're doing. We think the community needs this, and we're willing to take on some additional risk to have you as a tenant. And so I would tell you, very few places would have done for us what they did for us here, but that was our biggest challenge. Our second challenge is
Okay.
marketing.
Yeah.
So,
How
you
did
can
you
do a
solve
lot
that?
of you could do a lot of pay per click. It's not going to help you at all. These rural communities, everything's done by word of mouth. Everyone knows everybody. You have to start showing up to committees and meetings and economic development meetings and chamber meetings. You have to be a constant face because they want to trust you. It's not about price. They want to trust you. And if you can earn that, you will have great business in these communities. So your growth pattern doesn't look like this. Your growth pattern is just like this. It's a
Hmm.
slow path, which is
Okay.
more sustainable if you ask me. They're long-term relationships. They know you now. It's not just I found you online and you were cheaper. They know who you are. I have clients who know my kids' names, like they
Okay.
go to school with my kids. And that's the
Okay.
beauty about being in these rural communities is it's not always about price anymore. They want to know that you can provide quality service and they can trust you. If you can do that, they'll be customers for life. They're not going anywhere.
So makes sense. Absolutely. How you do your marketing?
A lot that way, yeah. So we've tried pay per click, and for the amount you wind up spending, it's a lot more effective for me to just attend local events. I also do speaking engagements when I can, and then conferences. Conferences are great because one of our core services is managed services. And what we found out really early on, especially with these small and medium sized businesses, is they have very little in house IT staff. And so they're really managing a lot on a very small budget. And when you go to a conference and you exhibit and you have a booth and they actually have time they can sit down with you, people start to tell you their problems. Oh yeah, we've had this problem for 4 years and no one can figure it out. And so they start to share these problems with you, and you have an opportunity to talk about what the solutions to those are. And that creates a long-term bond with that client in which they trust you. You've created credibility because you're now solving problems that they couldn't have created otherwise. You're creating value for them. And so it's hard to do that in a pay-per-click ad that you see for 1 second. But in face-to-face conversations, it becomes very clear very easily. And we tend to prefer that marketing strategy. Even as we expand, we'll likely expand with more sales teams that are doing that face-to-face marketing, and we'll do advertisements. There's always a spot for that, I guess. But I like to be out in the community, and I think part of our growth strategy will always be what the community is.
Got you. And are you right now in that Ohio and adjacent cities, or you're planning to expand?
So we are looking to expand right now. We have a couple cities in Ohio, one of which is Cincinnati. And I say Cincinnati, but the truth is, when I tell people where Medina is, they don't know where my Medina is. So I say Cleveland. Everyone knows where Cleveland's at, right? But we're like 40 minutes away. We're not really in Cleveland. So we're looking at the Cincinnati region. I think that that area of Ohio is primed for a lot of manufacturing growth. And I think it's for a lot of small businesses. They have a great incubator there that's pumping out startups. And I think all those startups, um, especially Gen Z wants to work with someone local that they can grow with. And so we think markets like that make a lot of sense. We're also looking at markets when we survey a state, we're looking at markets where do the data centers live now, and then where are none. And what you'll find is that there are some markets that are growing. There's businesses moving there. There's colleges already, or there's a hospital. There's business, but there's just not enough population for most data center operators to want to build a data center there. So when we see a county that maybe is an hour or two away from the closest data center, but we see small business growth, to us that's an immediate indicator of that would be a great place to build. And what we're building are small data centers. So our headquarters here is 1 megawatt. Most of our expansion, we're targeting a minimum 2 megawatts. When you read data center news right now, data centers are building gigawatts, hundreds and hundreds of megawatts, massive, enormous buildings. And that's just not what we build. We build very small, sustainable enterprises or reuse buildings. We've done 2 revamps where we've reused buildings, and that worked great because you take an asset that's dying and you revive it. And I think that's great for these local communities rather than building something new. So definitely that's sort of like the type of city we're looking for. And anyone who listens to this, if you live in a community like that where there's a lot of small business growth and you're nowhere near a local data center, hit me up because I'd love to put it on our list and check it out and fly there and see what sort of
Right.
need exists.
How do you track which area is growing? Where are the small businesses coming? And also, what would be the population size that you cater to?
Yeah, I would say counties where there's at least 100,000 residences is a pretty good marker for county size. You start to get counties that only have 20 or 30,000 people, and it's just cornfields. There's no businesses there. There's not really many businesses at all. But you get over 100,000 houses, and typically you can look. So like each state reports housing, and they'll report where those are growing at. And what you typically find is the reason why housing is increasing somewhere is because business is increasing there. So like Columbus is a great example. Columbus has been on fire here in Ohio, but the reason why people are moving there is because there's so many things being built. That's going to require employees, and people are being hired in anticipation of those facilities going live. So here in Ohio, in Columbus, we have a defense contractor who's going to be building, aerial. I think they're like manned drones for the military. It's like 5,000 jobs. Intel's building here, right? And Intel's going to be a big employer boost. And so people move where the jobs are. So if you see a community where there's a lot of people moving there, typically you'll find that there's business growth. So like for us, the next step would be we've targeted a county that the last 2 years they've seen off the charts growth, just go from this to this. Well, let's contact economic development in that county and find out what's going on. We'll go there, meet with them, shake some hands, and oftentimes you'll find that they're doing something different. And I'll give you a great example. Again, when we in Medina County, there wasn't a lot happening. Building that fiber network and then starting to see businesses come here. Medina became one of the fastest growing counties in Ohio for like 5 years straight.
Well,
Yeah, so and a lot of that was, where else are you going to go to, right? You can't go north because there's a lake. So you got to start building south. There's nowhere else to go. And so naturally, it was a great place to put a business, but naturally it also meant it was easy to convince people to move here for those jobs. And so that's a pretty big sign that that's a community we should look at.
and you said your best outreach methods has been tracking the records of the counties where it's growing, and then you send your sales team there to actually meet and also do conferences there and stuff like that, right?
Yep. And don't
To
laugh at
create
me here, but
awareness.
like AI is huge in this space, right? You can use Grok or ChatGPT, and there's lots of different reports that get put out that they ingest, and so you can get some pretty accurate data, every month or two just by just by using AI as to where the growth's happening, which saves me a lot of time, right? We used to do that kind of stuff by hand, but yeah.
For the viewers, which one would you recommend if they have to study something like this? What best worked for you?
Well, I use ChatGPT. I've used Grok. I will say this. I think Grok does a pretty good job on technical questions. Like if you want to start talking about system administration questions, or if you're stuck on something that's technical, I actually like it better than ChatGPT. But I think when it comes to breadth of data, like just the sheer amount that they're ingesting from every data source imaginable, ChatGPT seems to be doing a pretty good job. And I'm sure there are others that are going to jump on board and do the same thing, but I think they just have a first movers advantage in this regard.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, those are some people are using it, and there's some remarkable stuff that you can get done from there, right? So you said for your next 12, like rest of the year, you plan to grow in that area, and you later on for next the year after, you will probably expand going south now for now, right?
Yeah, so we're looking roughly about 6 locations in Ohio right now, and they're all very similar demographics. They're all very similar in terms of their need and proximity to the closest data center, but they're all experiencing really good growth right now. They're experiencing manufacturing coming back. They're experiencing startups, incubators. They have hospitals. They have universities. They have drivers of employment. And each state that we're looking at each of those states having 5 or 6 different data centers in each of those states, and all in very similar markets. So we'll probably spend a lot of time the next 2 years here in Ohio, and then from there look to go out west a little bit, so we can start to cover both sides of the United States, and then go out from there. And so we're basically building a mesh network.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And then it'll all work together. Nice. Yeah. Cool. So Josh, that was great information. Thank you for joining today and sharing all those thoughts. For the viewers, how would they reach out to you if they are interested to know more or get more about your company and yourself?
Yep. Well, our website is lightspeedhosting.com, but you can email me directly if you'd like. And that's Joshua at lightspeedhosting.com. And you're more than welcome to call the number on our website. But to be fair, we're busy a lot. And so our receptionist normally just takes a message and we get back to you. So you could probably skip the line and just email me directly if you need me. But yeah, we would love to know if there are different areas that have a definite need. And I will tell you, there's lots of people in economic development right now who are trying to talk as much as they can to these operators and get them to build there. It's just hard to convince them to go where there's not a huge density of people. So if you need what we provide, we would love to talk to you.
Definitely. It's a great conversation. Thank you for joining this show. Appreciate it. And to the viewers, if you guys like this content, please share and subscribe to see there's more contents like this. Thank you everyone for tuning in today. Thanks, Josh.
Appreciate it, Nell. Appreciate it.